your parents were from Poland.
Yeah, my parents were from Poland. My mother was born in Warsaw and moved to a small town about an hour south called Stachowice. And my father was from a town, I don't know how the English version of it, but he called it Ostrovce. But he was from another town, and that's where they met. They met in the work camps. I think it was 39.
How old were they?
12 and 13. That
Wow.
age, yeah. And so they would meet, and, they were kids, really, adolescents, and they would chit-chat and flirt on their way to the work camps because originally when the German army moved in there, they needed to build the camps, right? So they used the young people and the healthy people of the town, the Jewish population, to walk to the site and build and work until it was finished, until they did what they had to do. So that's where they met. And, of course, they would joke around and flirt, as kids would, and no matter what the circumstance. And they sort of had a crush on each other.
They ended up at Auschwitz before they were separated, with your mother, Manya, going to Bergen-Belsen and your father taken to Dachau. How old were they then? Do you know when they were separated?
Well, my mom and dad were in Auschwitz, I think, for a couple of years. And how they survived in there, I don't know. My dad was transferred out of Auschwitz before my mother was. My mother and her sister and her mother survived together in Auschwitz. And my grandmother used to tell this story because they would line them up every day, and they would go left, right, right? If you went to one direction, you went to the gas chambers. If you went to the other direction, you went to work. So my grandmother would rearrange them in the lineup so they all went to the same direction, because she believed that if they were all going to perish, they would perish together. And if they were all going to survive, they would survive together. But my grandmother was an amazing person. She kept them alive throughout their time in the camps. And when the war was starting to look bad for the Germans, and panic ensued, and they were starting to ship surviving prisoners into Germany and out of Poland, that's when the three of them were put in a cattle car and shipped to Bergen-Belsen, where they were eventually liberated.
There are many Holocaust survivors who just did not want to speak of that horror to their children. Your parents were different. They started speaking about this to you when you were how old?
My earliest memories were my mother talking about the war and talking about Hitler and talking about what had happened to her family, My dad was not a big talker about that period, and he passed away when I was about 12 years old. But I remember my mother constantly reinforcing the idea that we had to keep the family together because these terrible things can happen, and she felt, and as many survivors did, that it was their desire to repopulate and rebuild the clan that had been destroyed by the war.
You're listening to Geddy Lee. Yes, that Geddy Lee of Rush. Both of his parents are Holocaust survivors, and we honor them on this International Holocaust Remembrance Day. Did they actually, Geddy, tell you about, as a child, about the horrors they endured?
Yeah, they did.
So what did they...
I could have turned out to be a real mental case, but I didn't. My mom is a really interesting woman. She's super strong. And so she believed in sharing everything she'd experienced. Now, it gave me nightmares as a child, as I'm sure my brother and sister had the same thing. My brother was too young to remember a lot of this, but my sister's 2 years older than me. So we grew up with, the same, horror that she had survived, and we felt, blessed that we still had her in our lives, and my grandmother and my aunts and uncles, all who were survivors of the Holocaust. And so it's a very large community, and they stay very tightly knit, and that was their way of reinforcing the importance to carry on.